So I tore my hamstring, just minor tear, probably grade 1. Kept me out of the gym for maybe a week tops. That was about 2 months ago, it was the very end of June. Thought I'd rehabbed it 100%. Wasn't noticing really any issues with any of my lower body strength, any of my lower body mobility, but clearly I think there's still something going on based on that video from yesterday. Didn't really feel the knee shift when it happened, but there was a pretty significant amount of caving on my right leg. So I'm going to show you all what that looked like with just an empty bar. Because if you have issues like this yourself, you want to catch them sooner rather than later because they might turn into something really major. I think I've probably got lucky. So I'm going to walk this bar out backwards just so y'all can see. I don't normally do this.
Yeah, something you would never want to do with any weight on there.
I guess.
There's a great example.
So I'm taking kind of a higher bar position here. Again, not what I did yesterday, but I can't get under this thing and walk it out that way. So normally when I'm doing a good squat, go down, feeling the weight through my midfoot, come straight back up. So yesterday, what happens, my heaviest set, as I go down, right, the descent's okay, and then as I come up, I get to the sticking point, this shoots in all the way. My hips almost shift a little bit to kind of compensate for that, and I'm looking very crooked. Not a good look at all. I'll show you that again real quick. Almost hard to replicate. As I do it now, you know, I can feel some tightness in my back. I can definitely feel that weakness in kind of the right side because I'm accentuating it. But obviously not ideal. Good squat. Really got that shift in knee kick. Now, a lot of people, they'll go down, you'll see both knees shoot in, right? They'll come right like that. That can be a lot of different weaknesses. Probably not what was going on with me. It was, you know, very obvious that it was a unilateral issue. Put this forward. So, we're going to go through some exercises that you can use to kind of correct issues like this if you notice that they're occurring in your squat. Again, not something that you want to wait until it becomes a major issue. You want to get on that as soon as you possibly.
Just explaining, you know, kind of what was going on with his issue, I want to kind of go over what I believe to be causing it and kind of why it's such a big problem. So, as he was going over, you know, he had that unilateral, that valgus angle created, but essentially his knee was not able to stay in the external, or his femur was not able to stay in that externally rotated position. This could be, you know, caused by a number of things. I think in his case, because he can tie it to a specific acute injury in the hamstring, there's probably a buildup of some scar tissue back here that's just not allowing for the full function of the stabilization of the hip capsule. In this case, it looks like either piriformis, perhaps some glute med, you know, some of the primary abductors and external hip rotators just not able to fire and stay active, you know, especially with that heavy load on his back. And if you notice, you know, in the video that he just showed, and probably in the video from his top set yesterday, that causes an asymmetrical weight shift. So then he's driving more through his left leg, causes his pelvis to twist, just messes up the entire economy of movement throughout his chain, which is then going to, in the end, not allow him to move as heavy a weight as he can, or at least not as efficiently or not as safely. So just like Ben was saying, if you don't nip that sort of thing in the bud, it's going to pop up in other areas. So that weight shift caused by the hamstring is going to cause some issues in the top of the hip capsule on the left and cause then some issues in the lower back, which is going to travel up to his right shoulder and et cetera, et cetera. Generally speaking, injuries kind of zigzag up your body. So if you have an issue in your right hamstring, might go down to your left ankle, your left knee, or whatever. Especially if you're shifting over, causing excessive strain, excessive load on that side. Boom, there goes your quad. So I want to go over some things that can really help. Some basic things that can really help with this sort of.
So a lot of the problems in any part of your lower body are going to originate at the feet, right? That's your connection to the ground. So I actually spent 2 hours earlier this week working with Nick Engel. He's at ATX Physical Therapy. He was working my feet the entire time, made a huge difference. But one session isn't going to be enough to correct the imbalances that for me have probably existed since high school. So we're going to show you a real quick exercise you can use to kind of loosen stuff up. Again, this means before your workouts, after your workouts. It's not going to be a cure-all, but it is something that over time is going to help you develop a better connection with that part of your chain.
Right. To add to what Ben was saying, it's the sort of thing where, you know, years and years of stuff building up isn't going to be fixed in just 1 or 2 sessions, or, you know, every now and then. You need to do it consistently prior to lifting, especially something like squatting requires so much range of motion. So here what Ben is doing, he's mashing his feet. Okay, so let me get a little bit closer here. So you see the setup here is just a regular old barbell on the ground. I like to position my athletes up against a rack so they can kind of get a little bit of leverage. And what that allows you to do is put as much body weight onto it as possible. See how he's on his back toe there, putting as much weight on that left leg as possible. If you'll notice, he's flexing and extending his toes, creating some movement to help floss the tissue and help restore the extensibility of the muscles in the bottom of his foot. The fascial tissue on the bottom of your feet can cause a lot of the problems with a lack of ankle mobility or foot mobility because it hugs against your muscle tissue and doesn't allow for that extensibility to happen. Okay, that's where plantar fasciitis comes into play. Is it's so tight it gets inflamed and causes problems with the alignment of your ankle, knee, and hip. So that's why we do it, is because your feet help determine the alignment of your ankle, knee, and hip, which then help determine the economy of your movement, the amount of force production you can create, all that good stuff. So you're going to go about a minute or two on each side. Like I said, focusing on just kind of getting the full length there, but really focusing on the arch of the foot. But also, once you find a tender spot, that's what you want to focus on. Kind of start with the whole foot and then go down and kind of find a tender spot, shifting your weight in and out as he's doing, everting and inverting, wiggling the toes, about a minute or two on each side. Now we'll get Ben into a position to match the calves. So nice thing about this is you don't need any crazy, equipment. You can just use a barbell for a lot of this. So we're going to do a nice barbell mash. So he's going to put the sleeve right there. Notice how he's creating a lot of dorsiflexion and kind of letting his toes extend as well, so that you can get a lot of stretch in the bottom of the foot here. You're kind of lengthening the tissue in the calf and the Achilles. So you can go all the way down to the Achilles, but usually most people's issues are going to be in the belly of the muscle there. Oh yeah, Ben's finding that spot right there where kind of the soleus and the gastroc overlap. You want to focus on your tight spots. You want to get the full length of the tissue, but you also want to, once you find those tight spots, you want to focus on them. The way I put it to my athletes is, it's like you have a ball of dough and you're trying to create a pizza pie out of that dough when you're in reference to those knots and adhesions and that scar tissue and stuff like that. So this is an area that a lot of people neglect, is the calves and the feet, and it can help tremendously with knee pain, hip alignment, and allowing you to fully activate your hips on something like a squat or a deadlift. Obviously a squat requiring more range of motion, so it can be a little bit more helpful. But as Ben noticed, mobilizing the ankles helped him big time getting in position and really sitting back on his heels to load that posterior on his sumo deadlifts.
I remember last year I was having a lot of issues with kind of the inside of my knee when I was trying to pull sumo deadlift, and as a result I had to go conventional for a long time, even though I felt I was better off sumo. Tammy and I came to Kinetic Body Science here at Big Tech's Gym. She found that a lot of my issues were stemming from kind of this area of my leg, kind of the tibialis anterior. Mike's going to explain how that is going to impact issues with your whole kinetic chain from your ankle all the way up.
Yep. So the reason why it can impact, especially with someone like Ben who doesn't have very high arches, so inevitably he's going to be prone to pronation, not to be redundant, but which pronation means kind of the arches falling in and the knee rotating in, which might be contributing to his issue on the squat that we were talking about. But if there's tightness out here, because of your body kind of fighting that, it's going to affect your ability to kind of externally rotate and really grip the floor with your feet, and really cause that arch to fall in even more, leading to just a lot of pronation and internal rotation of the ankle, which is the counter to what you want to be doing on a squat or a deadlift. So what we're going to have him do here to match it out is I'm having him internally rotate a little bit, and then also plantar flex, aka point his toe down as far as you can to engage the gastroc here, so to really expose these muscles. So once again, anytime you're matching, it should be pretty good and painful. Oh yeah. How's that feeling there, Ben?
It's actually not so bad. I think maybe if you go a little bit more there, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. You got a little bit more medial there. Yeah. Yeah, and some people have very, very meaty, tibialis anteriors. Some people don't, but you still want to address them. The development of the muscle doesn't necessarily show how tight it can be. Now he's got some pretty good developed ones here. He's got some good meaty ones on top of these. The tibialis right here.
And so the reason for that is I've actually been doing some things to purposefully try to strengthen those muscles. Again, this is not a muscle that you're really going to build up, right? It's not a bicep. But you can, when you're doing calf raises, take a wider stance and you really actively think of dorsiflexing, right? So as you go up and as you go down, you think of activating these muscles on the front of your shin. You're actually going to be able to feel them engaged a little bit. And that type of feeling is going to be very beneficial then when you go to squat or deadlift to keep your ankle in a good position.
That's another thing that you can do along with the mashing here. And just real quick to go over the mashing, you notice how you know, especially when he's giving me the feedback, I started out here, he said, well, if you go a little bit more medial, we can get it, and then boom, we found it. But you still want to be searching around, especially when you're doing it on yourself. You can feel where the tension is and where the tightness is, and therefore you can adjust it as needed. Now, if someone else is doing it for you, it might allow you to relax the joint a little bit more and be a little bit less engaged because you're not having to put any pressure. And also the person doing it can probably put a little bit more pressure than you can on yourself. So there are pros and cons to doing it on yourself and pros and cons to having someone do it for you. If I had to choose, I'd probably have someone like Ben or someone who knows what they're doing do it on me, because they can really get in there. I can really relax. I can focus on the movement once again to help floss the tissue. Yeah, so oh yeah, I want to show you guys real quick an exercise to kind of piggyback off what Ben was saying. Very, very basic exercise that can really help build strength in that area and help you move correctly. So it's called a toe raise. So typically, when you do a calf raise, you're raising up on the toes. Like he was saying, not letting the knees pronate and go in, really focus on staying even on the toes. You can do the opposite. Standing from a step especially, pulling the toes up, getting a good squeeze at the top to help engage. Now, finding your balance can be a little bit challenging, but once you find it, it can really be helpful. Just touching the toes at the bottom, getting as high as you can at the top. I'm already starting to feel a pretty good burn there. Can help big time. The other thing you can do, there's some different banded exercises you can do to really add some resistance to that dorsiflexion as well. Most people, if I had to say, plenty of strength back in the calves, the gastroc, and the soleus, not enough strength here, which can contribute to that issue of the knees diving in and not fully stabilizing. But also because they're not able to engage, then they get real tight, because then excessive strain is put on them because they're not in the right position when you're doing other movements.
Now, if you're trying to get to this point and you're feeling like, look, it's too painful, I can't take any pressure there, you haven't worked on this ever, it's a new thing for you, one of the first things I did to start loosening up this area, just a basic calf stretch, get against the wall, kind of lean into the stretch. You're going to feel it in the back of your leg, in your calf, but then you can kind of let your knee fall out, try and get a little external rotation around that ankle, and you can get just a little bit of stretch up in there. It's a very easy way. You hold it for maybe a 10 count, release, go in if you like, a little bit. Again, that's maybe more calf, more maybe a little bit of Achilles tendon. Go back out. Just try and ease yourself into that. Again, focus on your breathing. It can be a good way to just get a little bit of loosening on its own. Probably not going to be enough, but then you combine it with these other exercises. It's a nice gradual transition.
Alright guys, so after we've gone over kind of the mashing of the feet, mashing of the calves, mashing some other areas, now we're going to go over to how to mobilize your ankle a little bit more to get into a better position on the squat. So real quick, what we're looking to do is increase the angle that you have, the acute angle there between your lower leg and your foot. It's called dorsiflexion. That's where a lot of people have issues on squats, is they do not have that ability to dorsiflex, so then they're going to be tipping forward and compensating by letting their chest fall forward, which is, as we all know, not what you're looking to do on squats at all. You don't want to be hoarding that weight up. So what we're going to look to do is put the band over top of your talus, the bone right on the top of your foot here, to stabilize that bone. Get plenty of tension down on the band. I like to do it barefoot so it can really act as though I don't have any support from the shoe at all. Like I said, get plenty of tension, then I'm going to get down to kind of like a lunge position, but my back leg's going to be on the ground, okay? What I'm looking to do is create an anterior glide of my tibia over my ankle to literally move the structures, aka the bones, in my shin, so that I can get a more acute angle between my shin and my foot. So what I'm going to do is what I call searching, okay? So I'm going to search around for tightness. So when I go in lateral and I'm externally rotating, don't feel too much there. So then I'm going to internally rotate, go towards the, my midline a little bit more. Boom, there we go. So where you feel the tightness might vary. You might feel it in the bottom of your foot, your Achilles up into the calf, or you might feel more of just a blocked up feeling on the front of your foot right here, on the top of your foot, which is what I'm feeling right now. So I'm gonna push into that tightness. What the band is doing is, like I said, stabilizing the joint so I can safely push into a more extreme range of motion. Kind of push it a little bit, about 10, 20 seconds, then I'll back off. 1, 2, 3, push into it again. Do that for about 2 or 3 sets of about 20, 30 seconds. Then I'm gonna search somewhere else, find some tightness elsewhere. So coming out, it's feeling pretty good there. So still just for good measure. Oh, there we go, found a little bit of tightness. See how I'm keeping the back of my foot on the ground, or my heel on the ground. I'm not letting it come up, because then that's just compensating. You're not increasing your dorsiflexion, you're raising your heel, kind of like you're putting Oli shoes on. So searching for that tightness, push into it, back off. pushing the tightness back off, okay? Some people's ankles are so tight that you want to do it for 2-3 minutes per ankle, okay? Now, the mashing that we did of the foot and the calf is going to help this happen a lot more, because if the fascial tissue is so tight on the bottom of your foot and your calf, that is holding you back from getting into this position, you're not going to get as of an effective release from the band and not as much of an anterior glide of that tibia over the ankle. So you want to make sure you do that mashing prior to this banded mobilization, okay? Like so. Like I said, about 2-3 minutes. Anything to add there, Ben?
I think that if you guys are using expensive Ollie shoes or wondering if you need to get them because you're lacking dorsiflexion, you need to look at this type of stuff first. I think a lot of people use those Ollie shoes as a band-aid, and they're just then worsening imbalances that they have that they don't bother to correct. So look at this stuff first. Now, if structurally you're built so that you require Ollie shoes to have the best leverages, that's a totally different issue, all right? And in that case, you will benefit from them. But make sure that you're not just doing it because you lack mobility.
And to piggyback on what he's saying, he made a very, very good point there, is that if you're wearing Ollie shoes just to kind of, use as a band-aid before your lack of ankle mobility, that probably means you're quad dominant as it is. Putting yourself in those Ollie shoes, you are further loading your quads on a squat rather than sitting back on the heels a little bit more to load the posterior chain and really get that engagement of the posterior. So you're just creating more and more imbalance by doing these things to compensate, and what we call compensatory movement, or in this case, kind of a compensatory tool, so to speak. Because Ollie shoes can be a great tool, just like a belt, but both of these things can be used as a crutch and not just a tool. Make sure you're using these things as tools and not crutches. So the first thing that I would say for Ben to do is get at least as it pertains to addressing that specific area, is mashing out the hamstring and adductors on a barbell. Okay, the nice thing about doing it in this position, setting up in a rack like this, is it allows you to get a little bit of, kind of bastardized ART, so to speak, because you can engage that quad, which is then going to shut off that hamstring and now allow for a better release, and you can get a ton of pressure on that potential scar tissue or those adhesions and knots that are built up due to the injury. So what you want to do is kind of pinpoint where that tightness is. So actually, let's have Ben come over here and he can kind of hop on the bar and we can talk him through it a little bit here. So if his issue's in his right hamstring, first off, I'd say address your feet. If you're not addressing your feet, mashing your feet out, you're just wrong, because that's where everything comes from, all the stabilization, all the alignment. So he's going to put plenty of his weight. Now if he can even lift that left leg off the ground, just sit on the bar there, he's going to find, ooh yeah, you see that face? That's the face we're looking for, because you need that pressure to really floss the tissue. What you also need to floss the tissue is movement. So what I'm going to have him do is extend this leg to engage the quad, even get a little bit of external rotation. He's feeling that there, right? So find that tight spot in that hammy, kind of that glute tie-in, and extend, squeeze, engage those big ass fucking quads he's got here to really shut off that hamstring, allow for that release. Get a little bit of internal rotation, external rotation at the femur of the entire leg. You want to do this for a good minute or two. Depending on how bad your issue is, you can do it for even longer. See how he's kind of changed the angle of his body to kind of target a little bit different areas there. Get as much body weight on there as possible to really release that tissue, help release those knots, even break up some scar tissue. Scar tissue is the enemy of an athlete. It's very inelastic tissue that when it does get overstretched will lead to repeated tears and more scar tissue building up. So we call this mashing. In the CrossFit world, Kelly Starrett, he's really popularized this. Now I will say that some people overmash. You don't want to overmash. You don't want to mash just for the sake of mashing. If you have a specific issue like Ben does here, you want to be targeting that specific issue at potential other areas that are contributing to that issue, because 9 times out of 10, an injury does not come from where you are feeling injured. It is going to originate somewhere else. So in the acute, Ben wants to target that hamstring area where that injury popped up. In the big picture, he wants to figure out what's causing that hamstring issue in general. So whether it's ankle mobility, a pelvic twist to that side, a lack of activation on that side, which is causing the hamstring to just take more strain, whatever it is, you want to target that. So this is just kind of how we're going to begin addressing this issue with Ben, is mashing out those adductors and hamstrings right where the issue is to kind of help release that tissue, so that then we can kind of dissect it further and figure out what else is potentially going on, on his squat that's messing up that movement pattern and not allowing for him to really drive through that right leg and keep it stabilized and get all the force out of it. Especially a guy like Ben who's got these massive legs that generate a lot of force. You want to make sure he's getting the most out of it, not only so he can move as much weight as possible, but so that he's staying stable.
So Mike, would you suggest that people do this directly before their workout as part of their warm-up?
Absolutely, especially if you're doing a squat or a deadlift workout. Now, if you're doing your bench press day or something like that, or a pressing day, or a day that's not involving any lower body movements, not absolutely necessary. It is something that you want to do if you feel you have an issue like that we're talking about, kind of an acute issue. You want to address it every day for at least 10-15 minutes, and even spend maybe one dedicated day to a recovery sort of modality and protocol. That's the one thing I'd say is people don't do enough of is proper movement prep. That involves mashing, starting with the mashing aspect, kind of releasing the tissue. Then you get into kind of more activation drills, which we're going to go into a little bit later here. And then you get into kind of your specific warm-ups like on the back squat or the deadlift or whatever. We're not talking about static stretching, although we will do a little bit of static stretching of sorts to address specific issues. You then need to reactivate that tissue, because if you're static stretching, mobilizing a joint and then not activating, that's going to lead to instability at the very least and decreasing your power at the worst. So we want to make sure we're doing the proper sequence of all these things. Like I said, this is the day after squatting. Doing the mashing is going to be really good. Releasing that fascial tissue, breaking up the scar tissue, breaking up some knots, but also just generally speaking, getting blood flow to the area. It's also going to have a neurological component to it, because you have your Golgi tendon organ that's really sensing the tension on that muscle, and it's going to tell your brain, okay, release this area. Because so many of these issues come from a neurological origin. It's not just the tissue acting by itself. Your brain is causing a lot of these things to happen. So doing the corresponding strengthening movements is also very necessary. It's not just about the stretching and the mashing and that kind of stuff. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Let's do it.
We've covered the calves, covered the feet, covered the adductors, kind of hamstrings. We're moving on to the glutes, and the last part of the posterior chain. Still got the quads to do. Glutes are a big one. I think a lot of people, you'll look at them, you see them squat or deadlift, their hips are going to be shooting up. It looks really ugly. They might have a little bit of lower back rounding going on, upper back rounding. A lot of that is coming from poor glute activation. In my opinion, it's rarely like weak glutes. It's more they're not activating, they're not using their glutes properly. So this is very simple exercise. Mike's going to explain in a second. It can really help part of your warm up again. Help to get those glutes engaged a little bit more on your movements.
All right, so to kind of piggyback on what Ben was saying, this is a great mashing movement. You see he's using a softball here. It's a nice $2-3 softball at your Dick's or your Sports Authority, whatever the hell it is. Get them on Amazon.
Don't want to know where it's been.
Yeah, that's probably good. You see his face there. Glutes are probably one of the kind of most intense areas to mash, because it is the strongest muscle in your body, aside from your tongue, relatively speaking. Yeah, there you go. So they can get very, very tight. Okay, to the point that they don't want to fire fully, at least portions of them. So for example, right now he's moving on kind of his glute medius there. You see how he crossed that leg over. What that does is it exposes the deeper muscles in the hip, because you have your superficial muscles like your glute medius, glute min, and then you have the deeper muscles like your piriformis. So which you see how he's not even moving right now. He's found that sweet spot and he's just breathing. That's the other thing I want to focus on. He's really focusing on his breathing there and just letting that weight disperse that tissue and really just mash it out and get it nice and loose. And you see then he's moving on, kind of creating a little bit of a radius around that kind of focal point in the tension. You can even get up into the hamstring a little bit, but really focus on those hips and glutes. What this allows for to happen is your glute medius, to fire. So for example, on bench squat where he was, that knee was diving in, it is likely that the piriformis or the glute med in particular were not fully engaged due to whatever tightness in the hamstring or even glute max. So they were just not able to fully engage and fire on it, and therefore his knee dives in, isn't able to stay in that externally rotated position and really able to drive through his quads and his forefoot. So like I said, on the other movements, about 1 to 2 minutes per glute, maybe even a couple more minutes depending on how bad your issue is. You see how he's kind of changing angles, changing positions, getting that foot crossed over to expose those muscles. And once again, I want to emphasize, see that look on his face. On a scale of 1 to 10, the discomfort should be about an 8, 9, or 10. It should be pretty bad. What do you think, Ben?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, but it's kind of one of those pleasure from pain sort of things, or relief from pain sort of things. So because of that pain, that pressure you're creating, it should allow for that release, and honestly make your back feel better right away, because a lot of that tension that builds up in that lumbar and those erectors can come from very, very tight glutes as well as tight hips, which we're going to go into kind of when we go into the quads here next.
If you're struggling on those tight spots, you really feel like you can't hold it, like Mike said, focus on your breathing. Try and breathe out twice as long as you breathe in. It's gonna help you relax. It's gonna help distract your mind from the pain, right? Focus on the breathing. It sucks, but once you get through it, you feel that muscle almost give up that tension. It's a really great feeling. It's almost instant relief, and so it's worth pushing through.
Yeah, no, it truly is. It goes back to what I was saying about it being from a neurological origin. You will feel all at once potentially, depending how in touch you are with your body, that just release all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden your hip opens up, and then you can feel.
So I've talked a little bit about this tool before, back cane. This specific one's called a Back Buddy. My favorite because it has these prongs that you get in some tight spots. Right now we're going to talk about the Psoas, how that's going to impact your lower body on both your squat and your deadlift, even your bench to some degree. And how a couple different ways that you can release it if it's tight, if it's restricting your movement. Pretty much everything that's from here all the way down to your knee, kind of around that area. At least for me, tightness there can really end up in restrictions in other areas. So my favorite way to release it, I get down on the ground and I lie kind of like this, right? And I have my shirt off so you can see right exactly where I'm going to dig this rounded point, right? You do not want the pointy one. Dig the rounded point into my abs. So I'm going to start right up on my belly button right here. My abs kind of meet the hips, or kind of attached. So I'm going to dig in there. I'm going almost at a little bit of an angle. And this is, again, going back to the breathing, very, very important to relax here. If you're tight, you're not going to be able to get at the psoas because it's underneath your ab wall. So you're going to have to kind of dig in there. Deep breath, relax. As you relax, you're just going to dig in a little bit. You'll just barely feel it this way, all right? Feel a little bit of tightness. For me, it's right there. So once I feel that spot, I kind of internally rotate my hip a little bit. That helps me kind of get in even a little bit more. And then what I'm going to do, this is the kicker, I'm going to slowly bring my all the way up as much as I can, just like in a squat. And I'm going to keep digging in there. Keep searching around right in that area for the exact right spot where, oh, there it is. So I'm going to hang out here, just breathing through that. And then I'm slowly going to straighten my leg. Almost like a pin and stretch type movement. So really digging into the spot, trying to go through a full range of motions. Be real hard up near the top. And then down. Do that 5 or 10 times each side. For me, if I'm experiencing any lower back tightness, this is almost instant relief. If I'm having trouble hitting depth in the squat, this is a huge, huge factor. And sometimes even if I'm feeling knee pain, it's coming from this type of area.
The one thing I would add to that real quick that Ben was saying is when you're doing those essentially repetitions that he's doing by flexing the hip and then essentially then extending the hip, what I would cue him to do just a little bit more or think about a little bit more is as he's extending the hip, think about engaging the glute to really extend the hip and get a good squeeze at the bottom, because you have what's called reciprocal inhibition in your body. And so the easiest way I can put it is while you're flexing your bicep, you can't also flex your tricep. So in this case, the agonist, that we're working on is the hip flexor or the psoas. It goes deep up into, behind the ab wall there. So by engaging the antagonist, in this case, the glute max, and really getting a good squeeze, it's going to help, once again, from that neurological aspect or neurological origin, help release that tissue just a little bit better. So really see he's getting a good squeeze there, even engaging the quad a little bit, just to really take any sort of activity out of the hip flexor while he's releasing it. Because like you were saying earlier, if you're tight and you're engaged up there, your brain will literally, and your central nervous system will literally not allow for that release. So by engaging the glute and really opening the hip and extending the hip at the bottom of his repetitions, it's going to help to further release that tissue up in there. So just to reiterate, make sure you're digging in underneath those internal external obliques, getting deep in there and kind of pulling that tissue to the side, like you said, at an angle will help big time. Okay guys, so I'm going to show you guys another way to release the psoas aside from the one that Ben just showed you. Now I'm not quite as pretty as him, so I'm going to keep my shirt on, but here we go. So We call this a perched kettlebell Psoas release. Once again, a lot of this stuff comes from Kelly Starr at mobilitywod.com. We just are kind of helping you to know when to implement it, how to implement it, and kind of some finer points about it. So we keep talking about the Psoas. Well, the Psoas is a hip flexor, okay? So it literally flexes your hips. So when you're doing something like, a hanging leg raise or even doing hill sprints, you are actively using the Psoas. The reason why the Psoas is such a talked about thing nowadays is because the amount of sitting that we do in today's society really causes issues with that area. It causes hypertonicity, which basically means that muscle is constantly trying to fire. So think about it. You're sitting in an hour or two of traffic to get to work in a very kyphotic position. Hips are flexed, hamstrings are shortened. Then you're sitting at your desk for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. Then you come home and you're sitting at home watching TV or on your computer, whatever it is. We do a lot of sitting. There's even an article recently that kind of likened to sitting to modern day smoking. Like it is that bad for you. And I would agree. I don't know if we need to go quite that catastrophic, but the tightness that it causes really can cause issues because it disallows for the proper engagement of your posterior chain, for example. So those people where they go to pick up their kid and, I threw my back out. A lot of that comes from your hips, not necessarily a weak back or not using your legs enough or whatever that is. It comes from the fact that these muscles are so tight and constantly firing. This muscle actually connects to the lumbar. So if it's so tight, it can literally pull your SI joint out of alignment, which will then cause spasms and all kinds of issues with the function of those muscles surrounding that joint. So the erectors, your paraspinals, all that kind of stuff, your glutes, your glute max. So when you go to do a squat or a deadlift, the only thing working is your erectors, so then you spasms, pull things out of alignment, all that good stuff. So by releasing the Psoas, you're going to better allow for the activation of those glutes. We've talked a lot about activation. What that means is literally your brain has the ability to fire that muscle. It goes back to what I was saying with the other Psoas release. If you're flexing your bicep, you can't simultaneously flex the tricep. So if your hip flexors are shortened and pulling you forward into an anterior pelvic tilt, causing excessive tension on the hamstrings, not allowing for those glutes to fire, it's going to cause all kinds of issues, not only in your lifting, but in your everyday life as well. So releasing your Psoas can help big time. So the way I think about it is I'm going to go just inside my rib cage with the kettlebell here. Kind of just like Ben was saying with the backhand at an angle. So I'm going to get over top of it, getting just below my rib cage there and inside of it, kind of moving that tissue out of the way. From there, I'm just going to put as much weight on it as I can. Once again, kind of shifting my weight accordingly. There we go, shift it back, felt some tightness down here. So in this position, what you can do is think about extending that back leg to engage the glute and also lengthen the tissue. Get a little bit of external rotation there. Just making sure to breathe and relax that midsection and abdomen, just so that you're making sure not to engage any of that deep core musculature to prevent that release. So extend, squeeze, get a little external rotation, just really floss that tissue. Once again, think about engaging that glute. Oh, there we go, there we go. So, great movement to release. Once again though, if you are doing any sort of mashing or soft tissue work on your own that you are not doing movement with, you're at the very least not doing it as effectively as you could. So whenever you're doing any of the soft tissue work that you're doing, you want your muscles to be shortened, not engaged, and if possible, engage the opposing muscle group to once again address that neurological component to help really shut off that muscle and allow for that release and allow for those sensory receptors within the muscle to do their job and help you to effectively release what you're looking to release or loosen what you're looking to loosen or activate what you're looking to activate.
So I'm here with my friend, Mike Lusby. Mike and I actually, when I first started getting into strength sports back in 09, 010, worked out at a gym in Northern Virginia. Mike was helping me out with a lot of stuff there. I ended up moving to California and we kind of, fell a little bit out of touch, but he and his wife just moved back into town, so we're going to try and start up some more informational videos, really looking kind of more at the technique aspects, maybe a little programming later. Today we're going to try and talk about some of the stuff that went on in our training session yesterday, what we learned from it, and how we're going to kind of adjust going forward. But first I want to let Mike, why don't you introduce yourself so that people kind of know who you are.
So as he said, my name is Mike Lusby. I've been coaching and training strongman for almost 10 years now. I've been a strength coach for 11 years. I've coached multiple national champions. I myself, my best placing was third at nationals in the under 200 pound weight class. 20 plus first place finishes for me alone, and athletes, countless first place and podium finishes in strongman. One thing I really specialize in is corrective exercise, fixing asymmetries, imbalances, things like that. Now this guy, he speaks too kindly of me, to say that I helped him when he first got into lifting. He didn't need much help. Dude was already strong as hell. I'll never forget, I've told this story a couple times now. On the Hummer tire deadlift, I thought I was a big badass, hitting 650 at 198. This dude comes up at 170 and pulls 100 pounds more than me. So this dude listen to this guy, he knows what the hell he's doing. I'm just trying to help augment that, trying to bring a different perspective to it. Like I said, I do strongman, this guy's a power lifter. We're kind of melding the two worlds. We can learn a lot from each other. We just want to get this thing going, give you guys some of our information from, being in the game for so long, and, fixing ourselves, and also help, fixing our clients.
Cool.